Today's video is brought to you by Audible. If you've ever wanted to experience classic books in a whole new way, now's your chance. With Audible, you can listen to thousands of audiobooks, from timeless literature to modern bestsellers, anytime, anywhere. Start your free 30-day trial and support the channel by clicking the link in the description below. Thank you. The Sisters of Albano by Mary Shelley, published 1828. And near Albano's scarce divided waves shine from a sister valley, and afar the Tiber winds and the broad ocean laves. The Latian coast where sprang the epic war, arms and the man, whose reascending star rose o'er an empire, but beneath thy right Tully reposed from Rome, and where yon bar of girdling mountains intercepts the sight. The Sabine farm was tilled, the weary bard's delight. It was to see this beautiful lake that I made my last excursion before quitting Rome. The spring had nearly grown into summer. The trees were all in full but fresh green foliage. The vine dresser was singing perched among them, training his vines. The cicada had not yet begun her song. The heats, therefore, had not commenced. But at evening the fireflies gleamed among the hills, and the cooing aziola assured us of what in that country needs no assurance: fine weather for the morrow. We set out early in the morning to avoid the heats, breakfasted at Albano, and till 10 o'clock passed our time in visiting the mosaic, the villa of Cicero, and other curiosities of the place. We reposed during the middle of the day in a tent elevated for us at the hilltop, whence we looked on the hill-embosomed lake and the distant eminence crowned by a town with its church. Other villages and cottages were scattered among the foldings of mountains, and beyond we saw the deep blue sea of the southern poets, which received the swift and immortal Tiber, rocking it to repose among its devouring waves. The Colosseum falls, and the Pantheon decays, the very hills of Rome are perishing, but the Tiber lives forever, flows forever, and forever feeds the land-encircled Mediterranean with fresh waters. Our summer and pleasure-seeking party consisted of many. To me, the most interesting person was the Countess Atanasia D., who was as beautiful as an imagination of Raphael, and good as the ideal of a poet. 2 of her children accompanied her, with animated looks and gentle manners, quiet, yet enjoying. I sat near her, watching the changing shadows of the landscape before us. As the sun descended, it poured a tide of light into the valley of the lake, deluging the deep bank formed by the mountain with liquid gold. The domes and turrets of the far town flashed and gleamed. The trees were dyed in splendour. 2 or 3 slight clouds, which had drunk the radiance till it became their essence, floated golden islets in the lustrous empyrean. The waters, reflecting the brilliancy of the sky and the fire-tinted banks, beamed a second heaven, a second irradiated earth, at our feet. The Mediterranean, gazing on the sun, as the eyes of a mortal bride fail and are dimmed when reflecting her lover's glance, was lost, mixed in his light till it had become one with him. Long, our souls, like the sea, the hills, and lake, drinking in the supreme loveliness, we gazed till the too full cup overflowed, and we turned away with a sigh. At our feet there was a knoll of ground that formed the foreground of our picture. 2 trees lay basking against the sky, glittering with the golden light, which like dew seemed to hang amid their branches. A rock closed the prospect on the other side, twined round by creepers and redolent with blooming myrtle. A brook, crossed by huge stones, gushed through the turf, and on the fragments of rock that lay about sat 2 or 3 persons, peasants, who attracted our attention. One was a hunter, as his gun, lying on a bank not far off, demonstrated, yet he was a tiller of the soil. His rough straw hat and his picturesque but coarse dress belonged to that class. The other was some contadina, in the costume of her country, returning, her basket on her arm, from the village to her cottage home. They were regarding the stores of a peddler who with doffed hat stood near. Some of these consisted of pictures and prints, views of the country, and portraits of the Madonna. Our peasants regarded these with pleased attention. "One might easily make out a story for that pair," I said. "His gun is a help to the imagination, and we may fancy him a bandit with his contadina love, the terror of all the neighbourhood, except of her, the most defenceless being in it." "You speak lightly of such a combination," said the lovely countess at my side, "as if it must not in its nature be the cause of dreadful tragedies. The mingling of love with crime is a dread conjunction, and lawless pursuits are never followed without bringing on the criminal, and all allied to him, ineffable misery. I speak with emotion, for your observation reminds me of an unfortunate girl, now one of the Sisters of Charity in the convent of Santa Chiara at Rome, whose unhappy passion for a man, such as you mention, spread destruction and sorrow widely around her. I entreated my lovely friend to relate the history of the nun. For a long time she resisted my entreaties, as not willing to depress the spirit of a party of pleasure by a tale of sorrow. But I urged her, and she yielded. Her sweet Italian phraseology now rings in my ears, and her beautiful countenance is before me. As she spoke, the sun set, and the moon bent her silver horn in the ebbing tide of glory he had left. The lake changed from purple to silver, and the trees, before so splendid, now in dark masses, just reflected from their tops the mild moonlight. The fireflies flashed among the rocks, the bats circled round us. Meanwhile, thus commenced the Countess Athanasia. The nun of whom I speak had a sister older than herself. I can remember them when as children they brought eggs and fruit to my father's villa. Maria and Annina were constantly together. With their large straw hats to shield them from the scorching sun, they were at work in their father's podere all day, and in the evening, when Maria, who was the elder by 4 years, went to the fountain for water, Annina ran at her side. Their cot, the folding of the hill conceals it, is at the lakeside opposite, and about 1/4 mile up the hill is the rustic fountain of which I speak. Maria was serious, gentle, and considerate. Annina was a laughing, merry little creature, with the face of a cherub. When Maria was 15, their mother fell ill and was nursed at the convent of Santa Chiara at Rome. Maria attended her, never leaving her bedside day or night. The nuns thought her an angel, she deemed them saints. Her mother died, and they persuaded her to make one of them. Her father could not but acquiesce in her holy intention, and she became one of the Sisters of Charity, the nun nurses of Santa Chiara. Once or twice a year she visited her home, gave sage and kind advice to Annina, and sometimes wept to part from her. But her piety and her active employments for the sick reconciled her to her fate. Annina was more sorry to lose her sister's society. The other girls of the village did not please her. She was a good child and worked hard for her father, and her sweetest recompense was the report he made of her to Maria, and the fond praises and caresses the latter bestowed on her when they met. It was not until she was 15 that Annina showed any diminution of affection for her sister. Yet I cannot call it diminution, for she loved her perhaps more than ever, though her holy calling and sage lectures prevented her from reposing confidence, and made her tremble lest the nun, devoted to heaven and good works, should read in her eyes and disapprove of the earthly passion that occupied her. Perhaps a part of her reluctance arose from the reports that were current against her lover's character, and certainly from the disapprobation and even hatred of him that her father frequently expressed. Ill-fated Annina, I know not if in the north your peasants love as ours. But the passion of Annina was entwined with the roots of her being. It was herself. She could die, but not cease to love. The dislike of her father for Domenico made their intercourse clandestine. He was always at the fountain to fill her pitcher, and lift it on her head. He attended the same mass, and when her father went to Albano, Velletri, or Rome, he seemed to learn by instinct the exact moment of his departure, and joined her in the podere, labouring with her and for her, till the old man was seen descending the mountain path on his return. He said he worked for a contadino near Nemi. Annina sometimes wondered that he could spare so much time for her. But his excuses were plausible, and the result too delightful not to blind the innocent girl to its obvious cause. Poor Domenico. The reports spread against him were too well founded. His sole excuse was that his father had been a robber before him, and he had spent his early years among these lawless men. He had better things in his nature, and yearned for the peace of the guiltless. Yet he could hardly be called guilty, for no dread crime stained him. Nevertheless, he was an outlaw and a bandit. And now that he loved Annina, these names were the stings of an adder to pierce his soul. He would have fled from his comrades to a far country, but Annina dwelt amid their very haunts. At this period also, the police established by the French government, which then possessed Rome, made these bands more alive to the conduct of their members, and rumours of active measures to be taken against those who occupied the hills near Albano, Nemi, and Velletri caused them to draw together in tighter bonds. Domenico would not, if he could, desert his friends in the hour of danger. On a festa at this time, it was towards the end of October, Annina strolled with her father among the villagers, who all over Italy make holiday by congregating and walking in one place. Their talk was entirely of the ladri and the French, and many terrible stories were related of the extirpation of banditti in the kingdom of Naples, and the mode by which the French succeeded in their undertaking was minutely described. The troops scoured the country, visiting one haunt of the robbers after the other, and dislodging them, tracked them, as in those countries, they hunt the wild beasts of the forest, till, drawing the circle narrower, they enclosed them in one spot. They then drew a cordon round the place, which they guarded with the utmost vigilance, forbidding any to enter it with provisions, on pain of instant death. And as this menace was rigorously executed, in a short time the besieged bandits were starved into a surrender. The French troops were now daily expected, for they had been seen at Velletri and Nemi. At the same time it was affirmed that several outlaws had taken up their abode at Rocca Giovane, a deserted village on the summit of one of these hills, and it was supposed that they would make that place the scene of their final retreat. The next day, as Annina worked in the podere, a party of French horse passed by along the road that separated her garden from the lake. Curiosity made her look at them, and her beauty was too great not to attract. Their observations and address soon drove her away, for a woman in love consecrates herself to her lover and deems the admiration of others to be profanation. She spoke to her father of the impertinence of these men, and he answered by rejoicing at their arrival and the destruction of the lawless bands that would ensue. When in the evening Annina went to the fountain, she looked timidly around and hoped that Domenico would be at his accustomed post, for the arrival of the French destroyed her feeling of security. She went rather later than usual, and a cloudy evening made it seem already dark. The wind roared among the trees, bending hither and thither even the stately cypresses. The waters of the lake were agitated into high waves, and dark masses of thundercloud lowered over the hilltops, giving a lurid tinge to the landscape. Annina passed quickly up the mountain path. When she came in sight of the fountain, which was rudely hewn in the living rock, she saw Domenico leaning against a projection of the hill, his hat drawn over his eyes, his tabaro fallen from his shoulders, his arms folded in an attitude of dejection. He started when he saw her. His voice and phrases were broken and unconnected. Yet he never gazed on her with such ardent love, nor solicited her to delay her departure with such impassioned tenderness. "How glad I am to find you here," she said. I was fearful of meeting one of the French soldiers. I dread them even more than the banditti." Domenico cast a look of eager inquiry on her and then turned away, saying, "Sorry am I that I shall not be here to protect you. I am obliged to go to Rome for a week or two. You will be faithful, Annina mia. You will love me, though I never see you more." The interview, under these circumstances, was longer than usual. He led her down the path till they nearly came in sight of her cottage. Still they lingered. A low whistle was heard among the myrtle underwood at the lakeside. He started, it was repeated, and he answered it by a similar note. Annina, terrified, was about to ask what this meant when, for the first time, he pressed her to his heart, kissed her roseate lips, and, with a muttered "Carissima addio," left her, springing down the bank, and as she gazed in wonder, she thought she saw a boat cross a line of light made by the opening of a cloud. She stood long absorbed in reverie, wondering and remembering, with thrilling pleasure, the quick embrace and impassioned farewell of her lover. She delayed so long that her father came to seek her. Each evening after this, Annina visited the fountain at the Ave Maria. He was not there. Each day seemed an age, and incomprehensible fears occupied her heart. About a fortnight after, letters arrived from Maria. They came to say that she had been ill of the malaria fever, that she was now convalescent, but that change of air was necessary for her recovery, and that she had obtained leave to spend a month at home at Albano. She asked her father to come the next day to fetch her. These were pleasant tidings for Annina. She resolved to disclose everything to her sister, and during her long visit, she doubted not but that she would contrive her happiness. Old Andrea departed the following morning, and the whole day was spent by the sweet girl in dreams of future bliss. In the evening, Maria arrived, weak and wan, with all the marks of that dread illness about her, yet, as she assured her sister, feeling quite well. As they sat at their frugal supper, several villagers came in to inquire for Maria, but all their talk was of the French soldiers and the robbers, of whom a band of at least 20 was collected in Roccagiovanni, strictly watched by the military. "We may be grateful to the French," said Andrea. "For this good deed, the country will be rid of these ruffians." "True, friend," said another, "but it is horrible to think what these men suffer. They have, it appears, exhausted all the food they brought with them to the village, and are literally starving. They have not an ounce of macaroni among them, and a poor fellow who was taken and executed yesterday was a mere anatomy. You could tell every bone in his skin." "There was a sad story the other day," said another, "of an old man from Nemi, whose son, they say, is among them at Roccagiovanni. He was found within the lines with some bacala under his pastrano and shot on the spot." "There is not a more desperate gang," observed the first speaker, "in the States and the Regno put together. They have sworn never to yield, but upon good terms. To secure these, their plan is to waylay passengers and make prisoners, whom they keep as hostages for mild treatment from the government. But the French are merciless. They are better pleased that the bandits wreak their vengeance on these poor creatures than spare one of their lives. They have captured 2 persons already," said another, "and there is old Bettatossi half frantic, for she is sure her son is taken. He has not been at home these 10 days. "I should rather guess," said an old man, "that he went there with good will. The young scapegrace kept company with Domenico Baldi of Nemi." "No worse company could he have kept in the whole country," said Andrea. "Domenico is the bad son of a bad race. Is he in the village with the rest?" "My own eyes assured me of that," replied the other. "When I was up the hill with eggs and fowls to the piquette there, I saw the branches of an ilex move. The poor fellow was weak perhaps, and could not keep his hold. Presently he dropped to the ground. Every musket was levelled at him, but he started up and was away like a hare among the rocks. Once he turned, and then I saw Domenico as plainly, though thinner, poor lad, by much than he was, as plainly as I now see. Santa Vergine, what is the matter with Nina? She had fainted. The company broke up, and she was left to her sister's care. When the poor child came to herself, she was fully aware of her situation and said nothing except expressing a wish to retire to rest. Maria was in high spirits at the prospect of her long holiday at home, but the illness of her sister made her refrain from talking that night, and blessing her as she said good night, she soon slept. Domenico starving, Domenico trying to escape, and dying through hunger was the vision of horror that wholly possessed poor Annina. At another time, the discovery that her lover was a robber might have inflicted pangs as keen as those which she now felt. But this at present made a faint impression, obscured by worse wretchedness. Maria was in a deep and tranquil sleep. Annina rose, dressed herself silently, and crept downstairs. She stored her market basket with what food there was in the house, and, unlatching the cottage door, issued forth, resolved to reach Roccagiovanni and to administer to her lover's dreadful wants. The night was dark, but this was favourable, for she knew every path and turn of the hills, every bush and knoll of ground between her home and the deserted village which occupies the summit of that hill. You may see the dark outline of some of its houses about 2 hours' walk from her cottage. The night was dark, but still. The Libesio brought the clouds below the mountain tops and veiled the horizon in mist. Not a leaf stirred. Her footsteps sounded loud in her ears, but resolution overcame fear. She had entered yon ilex grove. Her spirits rose with her success, when suddenly she was challenged by a sentinel. No time for escape. Fear chilled her blood. Her basket dropped from her arm. Its contents rolled out on the ground. The soldier fired his gun and brought several others round him. She was made prisoner. In the morning, when Maria awoke, she missed her sister from her side. I have overslept myself, she thought, and Nina would not disturb me. But when she came downstairs and met her father, and Annina did not appear, they began to wonder. She was not in the podere. 2 hours passed, and then Andrea went to seek her. Entering the near village, he saw the contadini crowding together, and a stifled exclamation of "Ecco il padre" told him that some evil had betided. His first impression was that his daughter was drowned, but the truth, that she had been taken by the French carrying provisions within the forbidden line, was still more terrible. He returned in frantic desperation to his cottage, first to acquaint Maria with what had happened, and then to ascend the hill to save his child from her impending fate. Maria heard his tale with horror. But an hospital is a school in which to learn self-possession and presence of mind. "Do you remain, my father," she said. "I will go. My holy character will awe these men. My tears move them. Trust me, I swear that I will save my sister." Andrea yielded to her superior courage and energy. The nuns of Santa Chiara, when out of their convent, do not usually wear their monastic habit, but dress simply in a black gown. Maria, however, had brought her nun's habiliments with her, and, thinking thus to impress the soldiers with respect, she now put them on. She received her father's benediction, and asking that of the Virgin and the saints, she departed on her expedition. Ascending the hill, she was soon stopped by the sentinels. She asked to see their commanding officer, and being conducted to him, she announced herself as the sister of the unfortunate girl who had been captured the night before. The officer, who had received her with carelessness, now changed countenance. His serious look frightened Maria, who clasped her hands, exclaiming, "You have not injured the child. She is safe." "She is safe now," he replied with hesitation, "but there is no hope of pardon." "Holy Virgin, have mercy on her. What will be done to her?" "I have received strict orders. In 2 hours, she dies." "No, no!" exclaimed Maria impetuously. "That cannot be. You cannot be so wicked as to murder a child like her." "She is old enough, madame," said the officer, "to know that she ought not to disobey orders. Mine are so strict that were she but 9 years old, she dies." These terrible words stung Maria to fresh resolution. She entreated for mercy. She knelt. She vowed that she would not depart without her sister. She appealed to heaven and the saints. The officer, though cold-hearted, was good-natured and courteous, and he assured her with the utmost gentleness that her supplications were of no avail, that were the criminal his own daughter, he must enforce his orders. As a sole concession, he permitted her to see her sister. Despair inspired the nun with energy. She almost ran up the hill, outspeeding her guide. They crossed a folding of the hills to a little sheep cot, where sentinels paraded before the door. There was no glass to the windows, so the shutters were shut, and when Maria first went in from the bright daylight, she hardly saw the slight figure of her sister leaning against the wall, her dark hair fallen below her waist, her head sunk on her bosom, over which her arms were folded. She started wildly as the door opened, saw her sister, and sprang with a piercing shriek into her arms. They were left alone together. Annina uttered 1,000 frantic exclamations, beseeching her sister to save her, and shuddering at the near approach of her fate. Maria had felt herself, since their mother's death, the natural protectress and support of her sister, and she never deemed herself so called on to fulfil this character as now that the trembling girl clasped her neck, her tears falling on her cheeks, and her choked voice entreating her to save her. The thought, "Oh, could I suffer instead of you," was in her heart, and she was about to express it, when it suggested another idea, on which she was resolved to act. First she soothed Annina by her promises, then glanced round the cot. They were quite alone. She went to the window, and through a crevice saw the soldiers conversing at some distance. "Yes, dearest sister," she cried. "I will, I can save you. Quick! We must change dresses. There is no time to be lost. You must escape in my habit." "And you remain to die? They dare not murder the innocent. A nun. Fear not for me. I am safe." Annina easily yielded to her sister, but her fingers trembled. Every string she touched she entangled. Maria was perfectly self-possessed, pale but calm. She tied up her sister's long hair and adjusted her veil over it so as to conceal it. She unlaced her bodice and arranged the folds of her own habit on her with the greatest care. Then more hastily she assumed the dress of her sister, putting on, after a lapse of many years, her native contadina costume. Annina stood by, weeping and helpless, hardly hearing her sister's injunctions to return speedily to their father and under his guidance to seek sanctuary. The guard now opened the door. Annina clung to her sister in terror, while she, in soothing tones, entreated her to calm herself. The soldier said they must delay no longer, for the priest had arrived to confess the prisoner. To Annina, the idea of confession associated with death was terrible. To Maria, it brought hope. She whispered in a smothered voice, "The priest will protect me. Fear not. Hasten to our father." Annina almost mechanically obeyed. Weeping, with her handkerchief placed unaffectedly before her face, she passed the soldiers. They closed the door on the prisoner, who hastened to the window and saw her sister descend the hill with tottering steps till she was lost behind some rising ground. The nun fell on her knees. Cold dew bathed her brow. Instinctively she feared. The French had shown small respect for the monastic character. They destroyed the convents and desecrated the churches. Would they be merciful to her and spare the innocent? Alas, was not Annina innocent also? Her sole crime had been disobeying an arbitrary command, and she had done the same. "Courage!" cried Maria. "Perhaps I am fitter to die than my sister is. Gesu, pardon me my sins. but I do not believe that I shall outlive this day." In the meantime, Annina descended the hills slowly and trembling. She feared discovery. She feared for her sister. And above all, at the present moment, she feared the reproaches and anger of her father. By dwelling on this last idea, it became exaggerated into excessive terror, and she determined, instead of returning to her home, to make a circuit among the hills, to find her way by herself to Albano, where she trusted to find protection from her pastor and confessor. She avoided the open paths, and following rather the direction she wished to pursue than any beaten road, she passed along nearer to Rocca Giovanni than she anticipated. She looked up at its ruined houses and bell-less steeple, straining her eyes to catch a glimpse of him, the author of all her ills. A low but distinct whistle reached her ear, not far off. She started. She remembered that on the night when she last saw Domenico, a note like that had called him from her side. The sound was echoed and re-echoed from other quarters. She stood aghast, her bosom heaving, her hands clasped. First, she saw a dark and ragged head of hair, shadowing two fiercely gleaming eyes, rise from beneath a bush. She screamed, but before she could repeat her scream, 3 men leapt from behind a rock, secured her arms, threw a cloth over her face, and hurried her up the acclivity. Their talk, as she went along, informed her of the horror and danger of her situation. Pity, they said, that the Holy Father and some of his red stockings did not command the troops. With a nun in their hands, they might obtain any terms. Coarse jests passed as they dragged their victim towards their ruined village. The paving of the street told her when they arrived at Rocca Giovanni, and the change of atmosphere that they entered a house. They unbandaged her eyes. The scene was squalid and miserable, the walls ragged and black with smoke, the floor strewn with offals and dirt. A rude table and broken bench was all the furniture, and the leaves of Indian corn, heaped high in one corner, served, it seemed, for a bed, for a man lay on it, his head buried in his folded arms. Annina looked round on her savage hosts. Their countenances expressed every variety of brutal ferocity, now rendered more dreadful from gaunt famine and suffering. "Oh, there is none who will save me," she cried. The voice startled the man who was lying on the floor. He leapt up. It was Domenico. Domenico, so changed, with sunk cheeks and eyes, matted hair, and looks whose wildness and desperation differed little from the dark countenances around him. Could this be her lover? His recognition and surprise at her dress led to an explanation. When the robbers first heard that their prey was no prize, they were mortified and angry. But when she related the danger she had incurred by endeavouring to bring them food, they swore with horrid oaths that no harm should befall her, but that if she liked, she might make one of them in all honour and equality. The innocent girl shuddered. "Let me go," she cried. "Let me only escape and hide myself in a convent forever." Domenico looked at her in agony. "Yes, poor child," he said. "Go save yourself. God grant no evil befall you. The ruin is too wide already." Then turning eagerly to his comrades, he continued, "You hear her story. She was to have been shot for bringing food to us. Her sister has substituted herself in her place. We know the French. One victim is to them as good as another. Maria dies in their hands. Let us save her. Our time is up. We must fall like men, or starve like dogs. We have still ammunition, still some strength left. To arms. Let us rush on the poltroons, free their prisoner, and escape or die." There needed but an impulse like this to urge the outlaws to desperate resolves. They prepared their arms with looks of ferocious determination. Domenico, meanwhile, led Annina out of the house, to the verge of the hill, inquiring whether she intended to go. On her saying to Albano, he observed, "That were hardly safe. Be guided by me, I entreat you. Take these piastres, hire the first conveyance you find, hasten to Rome, to the convent of Santa Chiara. For pity's sake, Do not linger in this neighborhood." "I will obey your injunctions, Domenico," she replied, "but I cannot take your money. It has cost you too dear. Fear not. I shall arrive safely at Rome without that ill-fated silver." Domenico's comrades now called loudly to him. He had no time to urge his request. He threw the despised dollars at her feet. "Nina, adieu forever," he said. "May you love again more happily." "Never," she replied. "God has saved me in this dress. It was sacrilege to change it. I shall never quit Santa Chiara." Domenico had led her a part of the way down the rock. His comrades appeared at the top, calling to him. "Gesù save you!" cried he. "Reach the convent. Maria shall join you there before night. Farewell!" He hastily kissed her hand and sprang up the acclivity to rejoin his impatient friends. The unfortunate Andrea had waited long for the return of his children. The leafless trees and bright clear atmosphere permitted every object to be visible, but he saw no trace of them on the hillside. The shadows of the dial showed noon to be past, when, with uncontrollable impatience, he began to climb the hill, towards the spot where Annina had been taken. The path he pursued was in part the same that this unhappy girl had taken on her way to Rome. The father and daughter met. The old man saw the nun's dress and saw her unaccompanied. She covered her face with her hands in a transport of fear and shame. But when, mistaking her for Maria, he asked in a tone of anguish for his youngest darling, her arms fell. She dared not raise her eyes, which streamed with tears. "Unhappy girl!" exclaimed Andrea. "Where is your sister?" She pointed to the cottage prison, now discernible near the summit of a steep acclivity. "She is safe," she replied. "She saved me, but they dare not murder her." "Heaven bless her for this good deed!" exclaimed the old man fervently. "But you hasten on your way, and I will go in search of her." Each proceeded on an opposite path. The old man wound up the hill, now in view, and now losing sight of the hut where his child was captive. He was aged, and the way was steep. Once, when the closing of the hill hid the point towards which he forever strained his eyes, a single shot was fired in that direction. His staff fell from his hands. His knees trembled and failed him. Several minutes of dead silence elapsed before he recovered himself sufficiently to proceed. Full of fears he went on, and at the next turn saw the cot again. A party of soldiers were on the open space before it, drawn up in a line as if expecting an attack. In a few moments from above them shots were fired, which they returned, and the whole was enveloped and veiled in smoke. Still Andrea climbed the hill, eager to discover what had become of his child. The firing continued quick and hot. Now and then, in the pauses of musketry and the answering echoes of the mountains, he heard a funeral chant. Presently, before he was aware, at a turning of the hill, he met a company of priests and contadini, carrying a large cross and a bier. The miserable father rushed forward with frantic impatience. The awe-struck peasants set down their load, the face was uncovered, and the wretched man fell helpless on the corpse of his murdered child. The Countess Atanasia paused, overcome by the emotions inspired by the history she related. A long pause ensued. At length one of the party observed, "Maria, then, was the sacrifice to her goodness." "The French," said the Countess, "did not venerate her holy vocation. One peasant girl to them was the same as another." The immolation of any victim suited their purpose of awe-striking the peasantry. Scarcely, however, had the shot entered her heart, and her blameless spirit been received by the saints in paradise, when Domenico and his followers rushed down the hill to avenge her and themselves. The contest was furious and bloody. 20 French soldiers fell, and not one of the banditti escaped. Domenico, the foremost of the assailants, being the first to fall. I asked, "And where are now Annina and her father?" "You may see them if you will," said the Countess, on your return to Rome. She is a nun of Santa Chiara. Constant acts of benevolence and piety have inspired her with calm and resignation. Her prayers are daily put up for Domenico's soul, and she hopes, through the intercession of the Virgin, to rejoin him in the other world. Andrea is very old. He has outlived the memory of his sufferings, but he derives comfort from the filial attentions of his surviving daughter. But when I look at his cottage on this lake and remember the happy, laughing face of Annina among the vines, I shudder at the recollection of the passion that has made her cheeks pale, her thoughts forever conversant with death, her only wish to find repose in the grave.